Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I want to introduce you tonight to a man who's got a little bit of a challenge. Let me tell you, his name is Ken Bosenkool, and he has launched something called Conservatives for Clean Growth. And, obviously climate change, whether it's man-made, whether it exists, whether it's man-made or not, carbon taxes are an issue that I think has at times maybe fragmented the Conservative Party, or at least the right wing. And Aaron O'Toole, the former leader of the Conservative Party, probably without a lot of caucus support, or at least caucus approval, went out, said climate change is real, climate change is man-made, and supported carbon taxes. And really, I think, tried to appeal to suburban, urban voters in Canada. Other members of the Conservative Party had a very different point of view on that. And one of the reasons why some of the caucus members didn't support him for leader a couple of weeks ago when he was unseated was because of exactly this position that he took. So Ken Bosenkool has got a big challenge ahead of him. Ken, tell me a little bit about yourself, your organization, and why did you launch this?
Well, a number of us, after Aaron O'Toole was dropped as leader, recognized that the party had a opportunity to revisit a bunch of issues, one of them being issues around climate change. And a bunch of us feel, as the polling makes incredibly crystal clear, that the Conservatives aren't going to win an election if they don't have a credible climate plan. And so we got together and said, there's all kinds of different groups that have different points of view in leadership races. And so we were going to put forward the position that the Conservatives need a credible climate plan for to move forward as a party to win an election. And we would like to see each candidate in the leadership have a credible climate change policy for their campaigns. And so we put together a group with Lisa Raitt, former cabinet minister, Jim Dinning, former Alberta finance minister, and myself, with more names coming in the coming days once this other little emergency calms down. And we're going to offer to each campaign to help them build a credible climate change plan.
Do you think that that's going to be possible within the Conservative Party, the existing Conservative Party today?
Of course. Why wouldn't it be?
I think as an outsider, taking a look at the caucus and some of the opinions that they had expressed in regards to what Aaron O'Toole did, that there's a sizable plurality, maybe not a majority, but a plurality of caucus members that felt that one of the things that he did wrong was impose this climate change carbon tax policy on the Conservative Party without consultation, and that a lot of them, frankly, didn't agree with it at all. And I think Doug Ford, Jason Kenney, some conservative premiers across the country have made a policy position out of opposing carbon taxes.
So that's certainly not what I heard from the caucus. I heard from the caucus that now is a good time with a leadership debate to have a debate around what a credible climate change policy looks like. In political parties, there's a time to fight and a time to unite. And now we've decided that we're going to have a leadership race. So it's a good time to debate these issues. Jason Kenney has an industrial carbon price on all industrial emissions in Alberta. There has been a price on carbon for industrial emissions in Alberta for longer than in any other province. And Doug Ford will be taking over the federal carbon price for industrial emissions in Ontario. So I'm not quite sure where both premiers are putting a carbon price on a vast majority of their emissions in their provinces. And I think that's accepted as the correct policy for Conservatives. And I think the debate more is around what to do on the retail side.
And what do you think should be done on the retail side?
Well, our group has not taken a solid position. There are probably members of our group that think a carbon price is probably the most efficient way. And there are other people who think that a rate smart regulation or incentives or other methods or ways to get at those emissions. And I think, if we help two or three of the candidates, it's possible that two or three different plans could come forward.
We're chatting tonight with Ken Bosenkool. He is head of an organization called Conservatives for Clean Growth that has been recently launched, and they're trying to have an influence on what's happening in the upcoming federal Conservative leadership campaign and establish a credible climate change policy for the Conservative Party. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Ken in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm chatting tonight with Ken Bosenkool, who is really quite an impressive gentleman. He is one of Canada's most successful conservative strategists. Colby Kosh described him as an election strategist and policy chef who lurks around conservative parties everywhere in Canada. The Edmonton Journal said he helps ensure victory of conservative-minded candidates and policies. Ken lectures and writes for the Max Bell School of Public Policy at McGill and is a research fellow at the C.D. Howe Institute and president of something called Sidicus Consulting. He was a founding partner of Cool Top and Guy Public Affairs with Don Guy and Brian Top. That's a great name, Top and Guy Public Affairs, Cool Top and Guy Public Affairs. In the course of career, he has served as senior consultant at CGI Canada, was senior vice president, national practice director for public affairs at Hill and Knowlton, Canada, where he was also the general manager for Alberta and manager of business development. Ken was a senior regulatory economist with 2 electricity firms, and he once worked at a bank. He's played senior strategic and policy roles in 4 national election campaigns for the Conservative Party of Canada under the leadership of former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. He's going to be working for the Ontario Progressive Conservatives again, which he did in 2018. He's been a senior policy advisor to 3 national conservative leaders, 2 Alberta finance ministers, and chief of staff to the Premier of British Columbia. He has played senior policy or campaign manager roles in 3 national leadership campaigns and 3 provincial leadership campaigns. He's got an undergraduate degree in business with majors in finance and philosophy from the University of Lethbridge and a graduate degree in economics from the University of Toronto. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like me, but apparently over the last 25 years, I've worked for all of the national conservative leaders from Preston Manning to Stockwell Day to Stephen Harper, and not the last 2, of course, but up until Stephen Harper. And it's been a fun ride. I've done policy work for premiers and prime ministers, and it's fun 25 years off and on in politics.
So Brian Mulroney, Stephen Harper really seemed to be able to create a big tent and keep conservatives together. And they were able to bridge the gap between sort of more rural, Western, prairie conservatives, social conservatives that you find, in different places across Canada, and the sort of suburban progressive conservatives or red Tories that, I think of when I think of Bill Davis or Peter Lougheed maybe. But Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole have not been able to do that. What's your assessment of what it's going to take to lead the Conservative Party in 2022, 2023, et cetera?
I think the biggest challenge for a modern Canadian Conservative Party is reconciling the beliefs of the people who elect you as leader of the party with the beliefs of the people who elect you premier or prime minister of the province or the country. I think the reality is that the members of our party and the people who elect us to office live on different planets and have very different views. And I think the genius of certainly Stephen Harper, who I worked with for 15 years off and on, understood that you had to keep the grassroots of the party engaged and interested, while at the same time presenting a plan to the Canadian people that meant you were worthy and deserving of their support to be the prime minister. I think part of it is timing, obviously. I think Aaron O'Toole, by any measure, had the economic credentials and the public policy perspective that had Canadians supporting him. But we were in the middle of a pandemic, and I think the pandemic issues were ultimately what undermined him. And I've said publicly before, the work that Justin Trudeau and his government did in the early part of the pandemic, from creating benefits for people who were suffering in the early part of the pandemic, probably meant that he earned a lot of the support. What's remarkable to me is that he didn't get a majority, and Aaron O'Toole held him to a minority. So, politics, there's 2 ways to win an election. One is for the other guy to smell so bad you get elected regardless of what you do or say. And the other way is to present a plan to the people who are going to vote for you that makes them interested and excited about voting for you. And of those 2 options, the second one's a lot more fun and a much more conservative way, I hope, of winning an election.
Aaron O'Toole actually won the popular vote, and had a policy or set of policies that was an attempt to appeal to to suburban Ontario and suburban Montreal and suburban Vancouver. And I am personally of the belief, our radio station is in the suburbs of Toronto, that if you can't win the 905 or the 905, 705, 519, and the equivalent around Vancouver, you're not going to win government.
That's right.
Because the NDP are going to take enough urban seats. The Conservatives are going to take enough rural and Western seats, such that the swing ridings are going to be in the 905 or the equivalent of that around other cities. Aaron really tried to move the Conservative Party to the center. Climate change, when carbon taxes were one of those issues that he tried to move. There were other issues as well. But in the election, he seemed to be undermined by some of the more right-wing positions on assault guns and the like. And it seemed like the social conservatives and people that were against climate change issues were the ones that unseated him during the caucus revolt and his loss. What do you think happened? Was it that he managed caucus poorly? That people just wanted to get rid of him for their own personal agendas? What happened?
I reject some of the premise of your question, but what I think happened is in the election was that the pandemic issues overshadowed the economic issues. And I think toward the end, he did mishandle the gun issue and that hurt him. But I think overall, his plan for Canada was a solid one. And had we not been in a pandemic, he might have done better. In terms of the caucus, Stephen Harper always kept one hand in the caucus and one hand on the pulse of the caucus and one hand on the pulse of where the people who needed to elect him were. And he lost an election in 2004. That was probably the campaign I was most in charge of, if I can say it that way. And that was a campaign where we made every mistake it's possible to make in a campaign. And Stephen Harper came back to us and said, I want you gals to figure out what we did wrong and correct it. And sadly, the party is not going to give Aaron O'Toole a second chance. We live in an age where political half-lives are half of what they were a short time ago. And the party's not giving him another chance. But I don't think he fundamentally did anything incorrect in that election. It was more an election where he was sideswiped by events than by the policies and positions that he put forward.
So should the caucus have given him another try?
I've tended to be a believer in allowing leaders to have a couple kicks at the can. When I look at politics over the last, double the time I've been involved, 50 years, most of the best leaders and longest lived leaders experience a big loss before they get a big win. McGuinty lost and had a big win. Chrétien lost to leadership and then came back and won many. Mulroney's an exception. Stephen Harper lost in 2004 and then won 4 straight. And it seems to me more the rule than the exception that you have to go in politics. You have to learn what it's like to lose to appreciate what it's required to win. And so my bias has always been to give leaders a little bit more rope than the party has tended to do.
So you've got a leadership convention coming up, and it would appear that the leading candidate is Pierre Poilievre, who's thought of, at least from a media standpoint, as a right-wing, almost Trump-like populist. He went out and, if not supported, at least encouraged the truck convoys in Ottawa. Could a progressive conservative, could a red Tory actually win the leadership campaign when it would appear that there's so much support for someone that is a Trump-like populist?
Once again, I'm not sure I accept the premise of your question, but let me say it the way I would prefer to express it. If I go to a race and there's one person in the starting blocks, it's easy to say that person is the front runner. And that's the situation we're in today. Secondly, I think our party is made up of a coalition of a whole bunch of very interesting type people. I don't think social conservatives have typically seen Pierre Poilievre as their central savior. Pierre has typically been associated with economic conservatism. He's put forward a particularly interesting brand of that in his launch speech. I'll let him characterize that. But I think there's room for all kinds of different kinds of conservatives to put their name forward. And if you would have said at the beginning of the last leadership race that Aaron O'Toole was going to beat Peter MacKay, you would have had a bit of egg on your face. And, Paul Wells is a good journalism that we're all familiar with. And Paul Wells says, one of his truisms is, if everyone in Ottawa believes something to be true, it's probably false. And so, of course, there's room in this leadership race for a competitive challenger. And I don't buy the view that there's always one obvious front runner and everyone else ought to be running for the hills.
So Peter MacKay was the front runner and came close to winning, but it was really a coalition of social conservatives that ended up supporting Aaron O'Toole that put him over the top in the end, which would suggest that you've got to appeal to that part of the party if you want to win a leadership campaign in today's Conservative Party. Is that not the case?
I think people who have a religious and socially conservative leaning, of which I would count myself as one, are a huge part of our coalition. And I think if you are a leader of our party and you don't have a finger on the pulse of that part of the party, you're going to find yourself into a bit of trouble. Which isn't to say that you can't figure out a way to manage those issues. I was an advisor to Stephen Harper for many years, and I was a public and private and otherwise social conservative within his ranks. And I always advised him to make sure that he spoke about family and that he spoke about family policy and that he made it clear that he was going to put forward a policy that rewarded families for having children and paid families that had young children. And he brought in the biggest social program in a generation, which is started out as $100 per kid and ended up with $20 billion a year for families with children. And so, I think that was a bedrock part of what Stephen Harper was, and I would call that a very socially conservative thing. And he also at the same time said, I'm not, if you're looking for someone to regulate on abortion, then don't look at me. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to support it. Our cabinet's not going to put it forward, and we're not going to vote for it. So, I'm pro-life, but I accepted that. And I think that's an example of how Stephen Harper managed the issues around social conservatism. Leaders since then have managed it not quite as well. But I think you need to recognize the importance of family. I was chief of staff to Christy Clark, and for a short time was part of her initial leadership. And I always said to Christy that if the conservatives in the BC Liberal camp want to hear you talk about family, want to hear you talk about the importance of family. So, we had a jobs plan and we had a family plan, and there's ways to do these things without being outside of the mainstream of what you call the suburban voters. And it's not easy, but it's possible. And with good advice and good policy, I think conservative parties can win both the members of the party and suburban voters, what we call the suburban soccer moms.
One of the other groups that I think that the Conservative Party needs to win, and I think Jason Kenney did a great job of this when he was what was it called? The Minister of Curry, or Curry in a Hurry, or something like that.
Yeah.
Was New Canadians. And, Mississauga, where our radio station is based, 57% of Mississaugan's have been in Canada less than 10 years. So, not in Mississauga less than 10 years, in Canada less than 10 years. And a lot of them are socially conservative. They vote Liberal, but they're socially conservative. How do you appeal to them? How do you make them feel like they're part of the tent, particularly when, frankly, sometimes they see some pictures and worry that the Conservative Party doesn't look like them?
In 2011, when Jason Kenney was a big part of the outreach into the groups of New Canadians, we did extremely well in those suburbs, and we did extremely well attracting New Canadians to our party. I will be blunt with you. I think in 2015, we made a set of tremendously big strategic errors, and errors around issues of security and terrorism. And we, instead of sounding like we were concerned about terror, we sounded like we were anti-Muslim. And I think we made a tremendous mistake in that election to allowed ourselves to get positioned in a different place. And we undid the work of 10 years of Jason Kenney and Stephen Harper reaching out to those groups, making them feel like a part of our coalition. And now we have to redo some of that work again. And I think you are correct that I wouldn't, social conservatism is such a tough term because you have to define it. What I would say is we need a leader who shows that they're for families, pro-family, and pro-entrepreneurship. And I don't know a group of people in Canada that are more pro-family and pro-entrepreneurship than New Canadians. They come here, they bring their families, they start new businesses. If they have to drive a cab to make ends meet, they drive a cab or an Uber to make ends meet. And they are among the most entrepreneurial and future-oriented people in our country. And they believe in family, and they have family, faith, and community. Like I always say, the magic bullet for social conservatives is family, faith, and community. But that means all faiths, not just the faith that some of us hold. And I think if we recognize the importance of family, faith, and community, we'll bring a lot of those people back. But they need to feel comfortable. And we need to make the effort. And we did that at one point, and we didn't do it as well for a period of time. And those communities have long memories, and I don't blame them for that.
What an incredible opportunity for me to speak with someone who's been so involved in so many conservative campaigns in the past. I really appreciate it, Ken. When we come back after some messages, I want to ask you about climate change again. I interviewed Preston Manning's former, I think he was chief of staff or campaign manager, I'm not sure which, Rick Anderson, who told me that climate change was going to be the defining issue of our generation. And I was surprised that someone that was so involved in the Reform Party and so supportive of Preston Manning would not say Triple E Senate or Western alienation or something like that was the defining issue of our generation, but the climate change was the defining issue of our generation. So let's take a break for some messages, everyone. We're going to come back more with Ken Boesen-Cole in just a minute from Conservatives for Clean Growth and talk a little bit more about climate change, clean growth, carbon taxes, etc. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Show on Saga 960. I'm having fun tonight talking to Ken Boesen-Cole, who is a professor at McGill University, the Max Bell Business School, economics grad, involved in 4 different leadership campaigns, consultant and chief of staff for Christy Clark in BC, and very involved in Prime Minister Stephen Harper's campaigns, someone that really knows what politics is all about, particularly from the progressive conservative or the conservative side of things. And when you sent me, or one of your friends sent me the announcement of the creation of your organization, I was frankly a little bit surprised. Given what's been going on of late, frankly, I was expecting get some announcement of populism and support for truckers' convoys and other things that have been so into the news, and not that there was a conservative organization that was campaigning for climate change or smart or clean growth, as you've described yourself. Just like, as I said, I interviewed Rick Anderson, former chief of staff for Preston Manning of the Reform Party, who said that climate change is the defining issue of our generation, and went to COP26 and went to event after event after event. So why are you so focused on this issue? And do you think the Conservative Party can actually see this as one of their major policy planks?
So let me say 3 things. Number one, there are many people who think that climate change is a catastrophic threat, and they think it's the most important issue we could possibly be addressing. And I respect people who think that way. I think it's an important issue, but I'm not in the camp of people who think it's a catastrophic threat to us. I actually think there are more important issues that conservatives can and should address: family and community and economics and all that kind of things. But I do believe that climate change is a catastrophic threat in the following sense. I think if the Conservative Party of Canada doesn't take climate change seriously, they will not be electable. It is a catastrophic threat to the electability of conservatives. And I've spent the last 10 years working with the Ecofiscal Commission and others, and have come to understand that climate change is a very important issue. And I've also done a lot of work with Clean Prosperity, who have spent a lot of money on polling across Canada and have showed that Canadians expect their political parties to speak to this issue. And if we don't speak to this issue, we can't speak to any other issues. And so it's become a barrier to entry. If all Canadians hear Conservatives talk about is what they're against when it comes to climate change, they're not going to believe that we are for anything. They're going to believe that we're against the whole enterprise. And I just don't think you can be, I don't think you can be against doing something on climate change and get a hearing from those 905 suburban voters. And so that's what I would say in response to your question. But I would add another point, which is something that I've come to appreciate and learn over the last number of years, which is that as the globe moves to net zero, there are tremendous economic opportunities for Canada in climate change. Now, let me give you 3 examples. Canada has all the minerals you need to make the batteries of the future. As we move forward with battery-powered appliances, battery-powered cars, and as we have more energy storage, Canada can supply the world with the minerals they need to build those batteries. Number 2, Canada is an energy superpower on current technologies, but there's no reason we can't convert the people working on existing technologies to new technologies. And natural gas is going to be a transition fuel from where we are today to where we are in the future. And Canadian natural gas should be part of the global transition from dirty fuel like coal to cleaner fuel of the future, like nuclear, like wind, like solar, like hydro. And we're going to have to make a transition. And Canada has a tremendous economic opportunity as the world moves from where we are today to where we are in the future on those energy supply issues. We have a nuclear, 60% of power in Ontario comes from the nuclear industry. We have one of the biggest uranium deposits in the world in Saskatchewan. These are enormous opportunities that can come to Canada if we take climate change seriously and position ourselves to do that. In the last few weeks, we've heard in the third place about all the opportunities in Ontario that Ontario is taking to make Canada a place where we build electric cars. If the world's going to move now, there's people that say we're going to have all electric cars in 2030. I'm a car guy. I'm gonna part with my my Mustang with the V8 very hesitantly, but I don't deny that a lot of people that don't live in rural like I do are going to be driving electric cars, and Canada should be a hub for making those things. Finally, talking to people that are really smart in the markets, people like Francis Donald from Manulife and other people, green bonds have become an enormous place for money to flow. The world is awash in green bonds and green money, and they are looking for places to invest. And if Canada positions themselves as a place where we take climate change seriously, where we have green investments, that money is going to flow into Canada. Now, I'm a conservative. I believe in economic growth and opportunity. So when we say we're conservatives for clean growth, those are the economic growth opportunities that I see that my party should be at the forefront of. And I don't think the Liberals are ever going to take seriously anything that happens in Alberta. And many of the opportunities for clean growth are in Alberta. And so what more natural thing for a party to get its act together on than on climate change and the economic opportunities around it? And that really is what people like Jim Dinning and Lisa Raitt are most excited about with our venture.
So let me ask you a couple of questions about some of the topics that you addressed. I was recently in Fort McMurray, and I was frankly blown away by how big that industry is in Fort McMurray. We create 1/3 of all the petrochemicals, the oil, hydrocarbons that Saudi Arabia does. So you think about how critically important Saudi Arabia is to the world oil economy. One region, Fort McMurray, is equal to 1/3 of that. And I talked to a lot of people when I was out there, from economic development to the civic government to industry players, et cetera. Every single one of them believed in climate change. I didn't find one climate change denier. I was looking for, I was expecting to find a climate change denier. I didn't find one. And they all thought, frankly, that climate change was real, that carbon taxes were going to occur, that there was going to be a regulatory restriction to oil sand development and shipping it. But they were all saying that we needed to invest in hydrogen, ammonia, and carbon capture and storage. And they wanted more money from the government, both provincial and federal, to do so. And they were convinced. And several of them said, we're going to ship just as much oil in the future, but we're going to ship it as hydrogen or ammonia or something else. What do you think of that?
Look, I said earlier that Alberta is a global energy powerhouse, and there's no reason why we can't change from being a global energy powerhouse. You know, we used to burn 60% of our power in Alberta came from coal. By 2030, 0% of our power will come from coal. We've already transitioned from coal to natural gas. And, you know, I live just outside of Vulcan, Alberta as my permanent home. And one of the biggest wind farms in Canada is outside my door. We have all kinds of water in Alberta. We have a nuclear industry in Canada. There's no reason why we can't move to a cleaner source, and Alberta can't continue to be an energy superpower. And it just takes a bit of Canadian ingenuity. That's the word Jim Dinning wanted me to use. Canadian ingenuity. There's no limit to what we can do as Canadians if we put our mind to it. And I just think a backward-looking, this is what we're against attitude by our party will be perceived for what it is, a bunch of negative nabobs who are denying the reality of the opportunities that are facing Canada. Let's be optimistic conservatives. Let's take advantage of these wonderful opportunities we have in Alberta, in Ontario, in Atlantic Canada, in British Columbia, to make Canada a leader in the net zero world that it has been in the world of the past.
You've mentioned nuclear a couple of times. Some people are obviously concerned about nuclear and Chernobyl and you know, the catastrophe in Japan, et cetera, or 3 Mile Island are great, or not great, are terrible examples of the risks associated. But I've had people on my show that have told me that actually from an industrial safety standpoint, nuclear, even though, you know, the accidents are extremely well publicized, the industrial accident is quite low. I've had someone on my show that have said, and you quoted the number 60% of energy. They were 40, 50%, I think, of Ontario energy, but that Ontario, Toronto used to have smog days all the time, and they've all gone away. And the reason why they've gone away is because we've taken away the coal-fired plants and we've replaced them with nuclear. And I've heard other quotes about, you know, there's no way to net zero without nuclear power. And that, you know, just today there was an article in the paper that suggested that the big company in Saskatchewan that's got the big plant is expanding for the first time in a long time, and their stock price is up because they believe that the world is going to turn to nuclear. Tell me what you think that the Conservative Party position should be on nuclear. Should we be worried about nuclear waste, or should we be investing in nuclear power?
If you want to address emissions and you're not willing to consider nuclear, I have a hard time taking you seriously. And I think that should be the position of the party. You know, there are countries in the world that are going whole hog on nuclear. I listened to a podcast on this recently. I don't have the countries in front of me, but you know, there are countries that have some anxieties about nuclear and they're trying to find other ways. Our group as Conservatives for Clean Growth wants to be agnostic about specific technologies and specific things. So here's what I would also say. If we can figure out a way to capture and carbon capture and storage in Fort McMurray and use that to make it clean, that's great. But if we can use nuclear power to make it clean, that's great too. And we should be pursuing both of those alternatives, because around the globe, carbon capture and storage and/or nuclear are going to be part of the future. And why shouldn't Canada be at the leading edge of either or both of those things? And so, you know, I think if you are serious about getting to net zero and you're not serious about nuclear, I have a hard time taking you seriously.
I had the Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs for General Motors on my show. And he said, if you're worried about climate change, the single most important thing you can do is go out and buy an electric car. Because if Canadians start buying electric cars, then what's going to happen is car manufacturers, because consumer demand is there, are going to build really good electrical cars. And provincial governments and power authorities are going to find great ways to supply that electricity. And that he said 40% of all of our emissions come from passenger car transport, not just transportation in general, which I was surprised that it's so big. And he was saying, it's interesting. He's saying, we don't need carbon taxes. All we need is consumers to go out and buy electrical vehicles. That's it. Period. Full stop.
Look, again, I want to be a little bit technology agnostic here. I think that is a great perspective. I've had other car companies talk to me over the last number of years, particularly a couple of the Japanese companies, who say that if we changed our existing gas stations to hydrogen gas stations, we could burn our cars with water coming out of the tailpipe, use hydrogen as a fuel source. Um, Look, let's race. Let's race and find out what the best technology is that's going to be the cleanest and you deliver the most power. I don't know if you've driven a Tesla S. I've been in the passenger seat of a Tesla S, and I've got a really powerful Mustang that I've spent a lot of money on that I referred to earlier. But I can tell you right now, if I put my Mustang with 500 horsepower beside a Tesla S, the Tesla S is going to kick my bottom. And those are exciting cars to drive. And there are hydrogen pilots going on for some small fleets, and they're driving around and blowing water out of their tailpipes, and that sounds pretty cool to me too.
Well,
So
go ahead.
Let's have a race to find the best technology, and maybe it's a multiple technology solution. But again, there's no reason why Canada can't be at the forefront of these new exciting technologies as the world moves to net zero.
Across North America, trolley cars, streetcars were all fueled by ammonia before World War II, and all they did is drip water vapors and oxygen out the back, because there's no carbon in ammonia, no carbon in hydrogen. So we've done it before, we can do it again. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back with some concluding comments in just a minute. And I'm going to ask Ken again if a progressive conservative, if a red Tory could actually win his leadership upcoming in the upcoming conservative leadership campaign. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm having a lot of fun tonight chatting with Ken Bozenkool, who is with the Max Bell School of Public Policy. He is a successful conservative strategist. He was described by someone as an election strategist and policy chef who lurks around conservative parties everywhere in Canada. The Edmonton Journal said that he helps ensure victory of conservative-minded candidates and policies. And right now, he has launched an organization called Conservatives for Clean Growth. And they are, surprisingly, maybe to some, not denying climate change. In fact, saying climate change is an important issue, that the Conservative Party has to have a position on climate change, and thinks that for you to be elected as a national government, you've got to have a position to appeal to people, I presume, in urban and suburban Canada. Ken, I guess my challenge here is a lot of people would think that you're wrong. I think that they think that the Conservative Party stands against climate change, doesn't believe in climate change, that so many, particularly people from maybe the West, deny climate change is actually real, or if it is real, it's not man-made and we can't influence it positively. And that for sure carbon taxes are a disaster and a mistake. And are surprised. We're shocked, frankly, when Erin O'Toole came out with a climate change policy that was supportive of carbon taxes. How are you going to influence the Conservative Party to put in place such a policy?
I don't know of a credible Conservative Party in the Western world that doesn't believe in climate change. Every single Conservative Party public position is that they believe in climate change. The question for Conservatives is, what's the most conservative way to get there? What's the way that we can get there to encourage the things we also want, which is strong families, strong communities, strong economy? And Conservatives for Clean Growth doesn't see climate change as a right-wing issue or a left-wing issue. They see it as an opportunity for Canada to position itself, for Conservatives to position ourselves as the party of opportunity, as the party of economic growth. And that's what we will be encouraging the leadership candidates to do. But I would say go one step further, that if we don't do this, we have locked ourselves out of the possibility of forming government. Now, it's possible that the stench around Justin Trudeau will get so strong that people will vote for us no matter what we say. And in many ways, that would be unfortunate. That's happened in politics before. But I don't see that as a good path to form government. We should respond to what Canadians want and need and expect, put the most conservative climate change plan in front of them. And then when we get into power, put it in place, because there are tremendous opportunities for Canada on climate change. And I think we should take advantage of those as Conservatives.
I think the majority of Canadians are in the center. Whether they're progressive Conservatives or red Tories or blue Liberals or Paul Martin Liberals or whatever you want to describe it. I personally think that's where the vast majority of Canadians are. And they end up being swing voters and vote Conservative sometimes and vote Liberal other times, depending on who the leader of the party is. Hasn't the Conservative Party in the last couple of years become controlled by, beholden to a right-wing portion of the Conservative Party, a almost alliance or reform party, part of the former Progressive Conservative Party?
The loudest voices aren't always the most numerous voices. And I reject the premise that our party's been taken over by those sorts of people. We actually had a party, 2 parties, maybe even 3 parties, maybe even 4 parties created in the last election, putting forward what I would call the right-wing whack job point of view. Maxime Bernier got 5%, the Maverick Party got 2%, and some of the racist elements of those parties were at the head of the trucker convoy. And I take solace that there is a home for that kind of crazy view, and that kind of crazy view got a very tiny base of support. That's not the Conservative Party of Canada that I know, that I stood alongside Stephen Harper, that we created in 2002 and almost held the Liberals to a minority in 2004, won government in 2006, and won a majority in 2011. That was a party that reached out and preached the importance of family, faith, and community, that drew women in large numbers. Against Ignatieff, we closed the gender gap because women were excited. Women and moms were excited about the support we were giving to families with children. And so that party exists today, and we have a leadership race, and that leadership race will be a contest of ideas. As I said earlier, there's a time to fight and a time to unite within political parties, and there's going to be some fights and maybe a little blood on the floor. That's okay. That's what political parties do when they choose a new leader. But at the end of the day, I am confident that our party will find and forge the right path to create opportunities for itself and for Canada. And that's really what Conservatives for Clean Growth is all about.
There was a great article during the last election campaign that compared Aaron O'Toole to David Cameron, the UK Tory Prime Minister, and said that Aaron O'Toole was taking the Conservative Party to the center, just like David Cameron took the Conservative Party to the center. And if he was elected and successful, it would forever be a more central party. But if unsuccessful, it would learn the lesson that was a mistake and forever would be a more right-wing party like the current Prime Minister in the UK. What do you think of that?
I think forever and ever in political world is dumb. In my experience in politics, there are actions and reactions. We had Brian Mulroney win a large majority, and then the Western and Quebec arms of that party blew themselves apart. Then we had Preston Manning come, and there was when I got to Ottawa with Stephen Harper, there were 3 Conservative parties in Ottawa, not one. And when I left, there was a Conservative government in power that became a majority government. So and if you would have told me, frankly, if you would have told Stephen Harper in 2002 when we won the Alliance leadership that he would be Prime Minister in 4 years, we probably would have chuckled more than we would have smiled. And it still happened. So. Actions and reactions within political parties are a normal part of progress. Aaron arguably took the party closer to the center. Maybe there's going to be a backlash to take the party a little more to its roots. But for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and that's true in physics, and it's true in politics as well.
Well, I personally happen to believe that climate change is a very important issue, and so I'm very glad that you're supporting this effort within the Conservative Party, and I hope that you do a great job in persuading not only the Conservative Party but the potential leaders of the Conservative Party to address it and hopefully incorporate some of your policy suggestions in their platforms. Will you come out and support a leadership candidate?
It's not our intention to do so. We put this thing together and launched it in about 3.5 days. And so initially we said that we would help any candidate that came forward to develop a credible climate change plan. We haven't really, been raising a bit of money and trying to get the thing launched and talking to Conservatives across the country who are passionate about this issue. So It's not our intention to support a single leadership candidate. That's not why we set this up. We set this up to help our party and our candidates develop credible climate change policies, and that's really what we're all about.
Ken Bosenkohl, if people want to follow your progress of your organization, do you have a website they can go to?
Conservatives4clean growth.ca, conservatives4cleangrowth.ca, Twitter handle @CDN Clean Growth, @Canadian Clean Growth, @CDN Clean Growth. And we've got a Facebook page, Conservatives for Clean Growth. And we'll soon be launching stuff on all the other sites that those kids play on these days. And go on our website and sign up. We had a 37% of the people who visited our website in the opening day signed up, which is a tremendous conversion and showed tremendous excitement. And we've got hundreds and hundreds of conservatives indicating to us that they're excited about the prospect. So we're going to have some fun with this.
Well, as a political junkie, I'm looking forward to this upcoming leadership campaign that you guys are launched on. And it's going to be interesting to see who puts their name forward. And I'm hoping that you're going to pick someone and run their campaign, and they're going to end up being hugely successful. Thanks for joining us. That's our show for today.
I did this so I wouldn't have to.
That's our show for tonight, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on Saga 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from, where are you, Vulcan, Alberta? Is that what you said?
I'm actually in Kimberley, BC, a little ski hill for the couple of days. So
Kimberley, BC, you can reach me. You can stream me online at www.saga960m.ca, even from Kimberley, BC. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Good night.